As I delved deeper into my aunt's life, I discovered interesting bits and pieces of who Ruby Adams was. I searched constantly to fill in the gaps, which led me to a museum in the Berkeley Hills. The museum held the collection of the Mosier family. It's a collection of photographs, scrapbooks, and guest books from a place called the Aladdin Tiffin Room, part restaurant, part social hangout, owned by the Mosiers in downtown San Francisco in the 1920s. I found Ruby's signature in the Aladdin guest book, written over 90 years ago. Come with me to a salon in time, risky, frisky, but minus the whiskey. Ruby was inviting me back in time to witness one special night, January 10th, 1925. Ruby opened the door, and we stepped inside to a large dining hall decorated with Oriental furnishings. Chinese bridal lights were strung from the ceiling, and on the walls hung orange and yellow tie-dyed curtains, adding splashes of vibrant color to the large room. At the back of the restaurant sat a large gold Buddha that overlooked a child's birthday party. Ruby pointed to a table in the corner. Eating dinner was John Davis, owner of Coffee Dan's, and another gentleman who was smoking a cigarette. Come over to the table. I want you to listen to what they're saying, Ruby requested. Ruby walked over to the table. John Davis smiled at her as she sat down. He put his arm around her, and Ruby leaned into the conversation. The food at the Aladdin was family style. Spaghetti was a standard dish, but the cook, Mrs. Lowe, also served one Chinese entree nightly. It was good, simple food with a lot of heart, and celebrity types and families loved the new restaurant. Ruby began talking to the gentleman who was smoking a cigarette. "When would you like me in Los Angeles?" she asked. The man began to speak. "The train leaves in 3 weeks. That will give you time before all the major studios audition for the talkies. And Ruby, with your personality and voice, you'll captivate them." As they spoke, a young boy ran up to her. Ruby greeted her son Steve with small repetitive kisses on his cheek. As she combed her son's hair back from his forehead, Ruby said, Go on back to the party, Steve. This nice man from Los Angeles is going to make your mother a star." Steve was attending his cousin Raina's birthday party. Ruby's older sister Edna was at the other side of the restaurant, trying to corral 10 children to sing and eat birthday cake. Ruby turned back to the man and said, "Steve's the reason I have a contract with Will and Herman King." "Ruby, how long can you play the same role in King's comedies? I can tell you confidentially, others in the cast are considering making the move. Besides, with John Davis in your corner now, you can afford to take a chance." Rumors were rampant about Ruby and John Davis. He was desperately in love with her, despite his knowing that Ruby didn't have time for anything other than her 2 careers, mother and actress. Yet he had won her over and promised to support her dream. They were purported to be engaged. The truth was, they were to be married within a few weeks, as soon as John Davis's divorce decree came through. "I met her playing poker," Johnny was telling the agent. "Luckiest game of poker I ever played." Ruby laughed and said, "You've got that right, Grandpa." John Davis was 20 years older than Ruby, and she would not let him forget it. As I eavesdropped on the conversation, I understood Ruby was on her way to Hollywood. The moving picture industry was growing rapidly, and her agent was certain that Ruby would do well on screen. Ruby was agreeing in principle to leave the Will King Company as soon as the show she was in closed. Ruby was between performances of another comedy called Friend Wife. She and the company had just returned from Seattle, where they played to packed houses. Gracefully, Ruby stood up from the table and presented the agent with tickets to the evening performance, then walked over to give birthday wishes to her niece and say goodnight to her son. I turned, just in time to see Ruby walk down the stairs of the Aladdin Room for the last time. As I closed the restaurant register, I heard Ruby say, "What a different life we all would have lived if the accident hadn't happened.